us, we have the elementary principals. I'd like everyone to introduce themselves to know who you have on the video conference here. Erin?
I'm Erin McGurk. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Megan Soroyce. I'm the principal of Willard School.
Good evening, everyone. Al Souza, principal, Hubbard Elementary School.
Good evening, everybody. David Kitzman, principal of Griswold School. Thank you for coming tonight.
I'm Julia Dennis. I'm a Board of Education member.
Thank you, everybody. The intent of this meeting tonight is an informational meeting. We're hoping to answer any questions that you previously submitted, as well as allow you to submit questions via email that we can answer for you. Our hope is that you leave with a better sense and understanding of what we've put in place for the opening of school, as well as to answer any questions that you may have. I'd like to share with you a little bit about the apologize. I'd like to share a little about you how the plan came together. Upon the state's release, we had a school reopening committee, which consisted of teachers, administrators, and parents. We met with the Connecticut Center for School Change 4 times and had 5 meetings. We really discussed a framework for drafting a reopening plan. Once we completed that, we then formed an administrative group that met for 5 consecutive days, as well as individual meetings, but meeting collectively to look at the plan and determine what the best steps were. We really needed to meet individually with myself and Erin with each building principal. Each building is structured a little different, even though we're going to meet the same requirements. How we're going to reach those requirements may be a little different in each building, but the overall where we're going to get to as far as student safety will be similar. So what you have in front of you, which was emailed to you last week, is that draft plan that was created. It is a draft. This is the 4th meeting with parents. So as we look at the draft, we're also looking at ways to improve it. We'll submit that draft to the state. It's not an acceptance. We just submit it on this Friday. It does not mean once it's submitted we can't make changes to it, but that's the due date for all districts to submit. I think it's important to, and the administrators will share a little PowerPoint with you, a few slides and explain things a little deeper, but I just have to convey a message about wearing of a mask. Throughout the state plan and through our plan, the wearing of the mask is the safety device that's going to prevent harm to students as well as potential harm to staff. The mask is to be worn at all times. So students, when they enter the bus, must have the mask on in order to enter the bus. No mask, no entry. And one of the rationales behind it is we recognize that if all students come back to school, that on the bus we will not be able to social distance at 6 feet, which means the mask must be worn, and that's the safety measure that needs to be in place. Upon entering the school, students must have their mask on. The mask must remain on throughout the day, unless students are in a social distancing of 6 feet or greater, and the teacher has given the students permission to remove the mask. One of the questions that came up, and I know we'll get to it later more in depth, will there be mask breaks? Yes. Will mask breaks just be at scheduled times? No. We recognize that students will need mask breaks, but we know that students need to have that mask on and to ensure their safety and the safety of others. The position of the district is that the mask is not optional. If the students have a medical condition that prevents them from wearing a mask, we will find other options, such as a face shield that has something draped at the lower portion that allows them to, not be restricted by the mask, but that will be worn as the mask would be worn. The district will provide students with 2 masks. They will be cloth masks that they may choose to wear to school. If they want to select or wear their own mask, they're able to, but that mask must meet the criteria that we decide as a district. I know some of the pieces that we're debating at this point, is there a type of gaiter mask that comes up from the neck that then goes over the chin and nose. The main thing is that the mask covers the nose and the chin, in a manner that's not loose fitting. We're not going to allow masks that have the one-way valve for obvious reasons. That one-way valve allows the air to escape out through the valve and then could potentially harm another individual. So someone can select to wear their own mask, but it will be at the discretion of the school whether the mask is acceptable or not. The way it's being perceived is that students, have rights, but the mask is something that's a non-negotiable. If a student is refusing to wear the mask, it would be handled as the way other things are handled in the school. And potentially, if the student refused to wear the mask, they would have to remote learn. They would not be allowed in school. The choice to wear the mask when it impacts others is not a choice. And the way we're looking at it is not wearing that mask could potentially impact other students or staff members as well as that student. I can't stress upon you enough that the mask and the importance of it and the district's position on it. Something else to note before we start here, the first day of school, it's not official yet, but it is on the agenda for the board meeting on Monday. The commissioner waived the 180-day requirement, even though we already did 181, to allow for 3 days of safety training, COVID training as it was called. We're going to utilize those 3 days. So the first day of school will be on Monday, August 31st for students. The 5 days prior, the week before, will be used for staff for training. That's with the board's approval, which we anticipate on Monday evening. I know that many of you sent in questions. We do appreciate that. I have those questions here. We hope to get to those during this meeting. During the meeting, if you have additional questions, we'll try to answer those real time as you email them. And each of you that have emailed a question will receive an email from myself or my assistant and ask you if your question was answered. If you feel that you did not get sufficient answer, you have more questions, you can sign up for a time and make a phone call. That way you get the answer to the questions directly. We hope that over the next hour or so that we can answer a lot of those questions. And I'm going to start by turning it over to Meg Soroyce, Principal Willard, and she'll begin with a little more detail on the plan at the elementary level. Meg?
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. So we're going to begin. First of all, welcome and thank you for joining us. We would like to start out discussing the 4 major operational considerations. Mr. Benigni has already discussed some of these points, but we'll go a little bit more in depth. So the 4 major operational considerations are face coverings, cohorting, social distancing in facilities, and transportation. So in regards to face coverings, as Mr. Benigni stated, it is a safety issue. They must be worn by all staff and students as mandated through the state of Connecticut. Will provide mask breaks throughout the day. We know that that's important. As to what that will look like, those are things that we will work through, but we will absolutely work with classes of students, cohorts of students, and groups of students to make that happen. We also recognize that we work with children, many young children, and that we will need to help them build stamina and help them adjust to wearing the mask. So again, we will be aware of individual students' needs and work with them and work through that. We have been fortunate to host summer school here at Willard, and the students have done an amazing job with wearing their masks. At first, we weren't sure how that would work, and it's worked out quite well. Many of the parents, the summer school parents, a shout out to them. They took opportunities or sought opportunities to help their children get used to wearing the masks and to build that stamina so that they were ready to come to summer school. So that would be a great thing to consider and to get started as we begin to get ready to transition back to school. In regards to cohorting, cohorting is working to keep groups of students together. We will be cohorting at the elementary level by class. So the same classes will stay with the same teachers. So that being said, we have made many decisions around cohorting. My colleagues are going to speak more to accommodations being made at lunch, having lunches delivered, recess accommodations, specialists traveling to classrooms to try to keep those cohorts together. There are circumstances for extending cohorts, and those focus on meeting the needs of our students. So circumstances that would extend include special education services, related services, tier 1 and 2 instruction. So that would occur in the form of reading and literacy and math, ELL, and instrumental. And for instrumental, the requirements there are 12 feet of distancing. So again, it's a circumstance in which it may extend the cohort, but we will certainly be mindful of the social distancing responsibilities and requirements. So that leads us into social distancing and facilities. And configuring space to maximize opportunities to social distance. If you have been to Willard or McGee, where we're hosting summer schools, you'll notice that there's signage out in front of the buildings, and that will be there at all the schools. There are reminders to keep the 6 feet of distance out front. There will be signage in the hallways to address that, to make sure that we are keeping the distance in those areas. And scheduling and processes have occurred to minimize the traffic in hallways at different times and to utilize different doors and things, again, to minimize those interactions. Classroom setups will include desks in the classrooms, and teachers now are working through configurations and those pieces. And we're also going to really be utilizing the use of outdoor space. So we are talking about outdoor learning and setting up spaces that would accommodate that and give students and staff alike opportunities to get outside. Transportation is another area, but it also goes back to, we were talking about cohorts. So there would be a cohort of students on the bus, on the van, or people that would potentially be transported together to school. So our buses right now are set to operate close to capacity. Students and operators are required to wear face coverings. Siblings are encouraged or should sit together on the bus, again, for those cohorting purposes. We recognize that if circumstances change in our community in regards to COVID, that there may be a need at some point to increase the social distancing standards for that. But of course, there would be lots of communication that would lead up to that if those decisions had needed to be made. So Dave and Al are going to give you more information here, starting with our learning model. So over to Mr. Kitzman.
Thank you, Mrs. Royce. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to present to you all today the learning models that we've developed as a district for our school year, for the 2021 school year. The first model that we've developed is the one that we'll be initiating as of right now on August 31st. We're very excited to have in-school instruction back in Berlin. There's a certain level of joy and excitement that comes with having the students and staff in the building. And we've done a great job to try to replicate that through distance learning in the spring. And I think that all the accolades in the world go to our curriculum office and the teachers for the job they did with distance learning. But we're very excited to enter into in-school instruction the start of the school year. That means Monday through Friday, normal school hours. We will, of course, be operating within the guidelines of the state of Connecticut, meeting social distancing guidelines and all of the recommendations as well. Each building has very specific operational things we'll be doing to meet the specific needs of the building itself, and those will be shared more on a building level basis. But that is what in-school instruction will look like. We are going to place an emphasis with in-school instruction at the beginning of the school year to build relationships. We really benefited from strong relationships with students and families in the spring when we moved to distance learning. We know that moving to a different learning model is a great possibility, and so we want to make sure that we have those relationships with students early. We're also going to be focusing on meeting students where they are. We're going to be very conscious of the language we use around students when talking about COVID and the school closures, and the message to them is not that anyone is behind. We are meeting the students where they are, and we're differentiating our instruction to support them to progress forward. And then the final piece with the in-school instruction that I want to add is that with the idea that we may have to shift to another learning model at some point in time, we will be spending time making sure students are familiar with the technology that they would be using should we go to a distance learning model. So in grades K through 2, that would be the iPads and Seesaw. In grades 3 through 5, that would be Google Classroom and the Chromebooks. And we're working with our tech integration specialists to make sure that that instruction happens as well. The next learning model that we may enter into is, or that families will have an option for, would be the remote learning. So remote learning occurs when school is in-school instruction is in place. However, some students, due to illnesses, quarantine issues or concerns, health-related issues in the family, are unable to come into school for that period of time. And that's what we'll call our remote learning. The remote learning will happen Monday through Friday. And at each grade level, pre-K through 5, there will be a teacher who is assigned that group of students to provide learning and access to learning opportunities remotely. So the best way to describe this, I think, is just through an example. Let's say across the district at Hubbard, at Willard, and at Griswold, we have a total of 20 third grade students who are opting into remote learning. We would have one instructor responsible for those 20 students, and that's the cohort they would be a part of, and they would have the learning opportunities presented to them remotely by that one teacher. We know that this is a model that students might be moving in and out from in case their health situations or concerns change. They'd be coming back to school and rejoining their cohort. So that's remote learning. The next model is the hybrid learning. The hybrid learning is one of the three that the state has required us to have ready to go. And the hybrid learning model is as follows. In each cohort, and remember, as Mrs. Soroy said, a cohort consists of a classroom. We would be dividing the students up into Group A and Group B. If there were siblings in a classroom, they would be in the same cohort for ease for those families. But the learning model would be that on Mondays and Tuesdays, Group A would be in-school learning, regular school hours in school with their primary teacher. Group B would be learning from home on Monday and Tuesday, and they'd be provided with opportunities to hone skills, maintenance opportunities, independent learning, I guess is the best way to say it, on those days, connected to recent learning they've done in person. On Wednesdays, we would utilize the same format we had with distance learning, where Wednesdays would be a communication and support day. So no students would be in school. It'd be a communication and support and planning day. Thursdays and Fridays, the two groups would switch. The Group B students would have in-school learning, and the Group A students would then be learning from home, again, building on the new learning that happened on Monday and Tuesday and such. And we would follow that cycle for the period of time that hybrid learning was in place. Hybrid learning will go in place if the state is telling us that we need to reduce the population of the school. The next model is distance learning. Distance learning for our returning families is one that we're all familiar with. I believe that as a district, we did a wonderful job with distance learning. We had very little time to prepare for it, and I'm very proud of our efforts to maintain high quality education for students. We did learn a lot though, and we know there are areas for improvement. We listened to your feedback. It was very good. We listened to the feedback of the staff. So a few changes for distance learning for next year would occur. So distance learning, again, would follow the same models it did last year, in the spring, I should say, where we have school on Monday, Tuesdays, Wednesday set aside for communications, small group meetings, those live connections, planning, prep, and then Thursday, Friday, back to distance learning. There would no longer be a grid that is district-wide that families would log into. Instead, the grid would be used behind the scenes with teachers for planning purposes, but each teacher would be pushing out via either Seesaw in K through 2 or Google Classroom in grades 3 through 5, the learning for that day. This would enable that teacher to be the primary instructor of your students, as opposed to maybe a teacher from a different building who was planning all of the math, reading, or writing lessons for the district in that grade level. We also believe that this will allow for us to differentiate more for the specific students in that teacher's classroom. The final change we'd have to that is we'll be increasing our opportunities for live connections with students. We got a lot of positive feedback about the live connections that we did when we made an adjustment to distance learning in the spring, and we plan to increase those opportunities if we move into the distance learning model. The final model that's available would be the homeschooling. Homeschooling has always been available for families in Berlin, and that is still an option. So some children will learn at home due to medical concerns or other reasons, and this would be without the support of the district. It's just the option of homeschooling, which you have. Meg, do you want to go to the next slide? Thank you. Next, and Mrs. Soroy did touch upon transportation, so I'll go through this one rather quickly. But we are encouraging families, if they're able to transport their children to and from school. And at each building, we're aware of the impact on our traffic patterns that will have. And we're making plans and adjusting our arrival and departures for that. Those plans will come out at the building level to the families closer to the start of school. But for families who are sending their students on the bus, we ask that they self-monitor at home for any symptoms that are consistent with that of COVID-19, and please keep students home if they have a temperature or are exhibiting some of those symptoms. To get on the bus, students must be wearing a mask, as Mr. Benigni had said earlier. We're taking that very seriously, and we believe it's a necessary step. On the bus, we'll be loading on the morning from back to front to minimize the interactions of students on the bus. Siblings will be permitted to sit together. Outside of that, we're going to do the best we can to social distance on the bus, depending on how many families are riding the bus. When we get to school for drop-off at school, each school will have individual plans for this, but our goals are to minimize the interactions of students. So we'll be dismissing from the bus front to back. There'll be separate entrances for the students going into the school from the bus, so that we can try to maintain the 6 feet of distance while entering the school, and students will go directly to their classrooms. So those are some additional notes about transportation, and I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, and there'll be opportunity for that at the end of this presentation, but also well into the summer, we'll have further opportunities to discuss transportation.
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about some important daily considerations. Before I jump into that, just want to make a note that the generation of this plan and what you've heard a little bit so far and reviewed is really a reflection of our crystal clear understanding of what our responsibility is to you and to your children. We have a relentless commitment and an unwavering effort to provide the absolute best for your family and your children under any and all circumstances. That is our charge. We understand that from central office down through teachers and all members of our school community. We understand that you are trusting us with your most prized possessions, and under normal circumstances, it's daunting. Under these circumstances, absolutely overwhelming. So please know and trust that every decision at every point in our organization is made with that crystal clear understanding. These are your lives. These are your students, your children who are coming in. You're trusting them with us. We also understand that this plan has to be extremely flexible for a range of circumstances, which is also can be a challenge to clarity. And we're working to look at all these individualized circumstances. We know people and families are in all different situations, whether it be daycare, work, supervision, health. We're not lost on that. So please know that while you're spending this time with us and hearing us, that each and every day we're thinking of those pieces. To our existing families at the elementary level, when you come into our schools, it may look a little different. Processes may be a little different. The heart, the soul, the energy is exactly the same. We're going to be doing everything we can for your kiddos. And please know that we honor and respect 5. We get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And for our new families, the families, if any parents or families who are on students transferring into our school system, kindergartners, we see you too. You're a part of our family. There are steps already being taken. We've made some initial contacts, but throughout the summer, there will be a modified K-Welcome meet and greet for our kindergarten kiddos and families. There will be opportunities for our students transitioning into our schools to visit and to tour. So please, we want that partnership. We want that collaboration. And most of all, we want you leaving understanding these people get it. They understand the academic responsibilities to our kids, but also the social, emotional importance for their development. So thank you for joining us and your interest for tonight. I'm going to go into just some important daily considerations, just some nuances that your children will experience throughout the day. So students, as Meg mentioned, will be grouped by cohorts. They'll be by class. They'll remain together as much as possible. And they will be assigned bathrooms. So you may have a couple of classes utilizing the same bathroom for contact tracing. But again, this is done in an extremely developmentally appropriate manner. Anyone who's worried about information around COVID being communicated to their children in age-appropriate fashion. We absolutely understand that, and we're prepared to do that. There's been some conversation about separation of student items, the use of lockers, cubbies, and we have a range of different options for that across the schools. But based on some CDC guidance and possibly avoiding the use of lockers and the separation of items, we're going to transition to using duffel bags that will remain in school for student items to be placed in. It will allow separation of all students' items and allow them to be stored safely while we look into some of the other storage options. In the area of specials, and specials are art, music, PE, and library, the guiding principle right from the start for us was maintain the integrity of these programs because they are extremely important to the experience of the students at our elementary schools. So they will absolutely occur, maybe a little bit different. The spaces may be a little bit different. So for example, art might be in the classroom or out in an outdoor learning space. Library will be in the classroom or an outdoor learning space. Our physical education might be in the gym, the cafeteria, or outside. And our music program might happen in the classroom, in the cafeteria, outside, because of spacing and social distancing expectations. And that's for instrumental and for vocal. Instrumental is primarily grades 4 and 5. As far as breakfast and lunch goes, breakfast will be this year grab-and-go format, meaning there'll be a table that will be or an area set up right outside the cafeteria. Students will come in, they will take their breakfast items, and the cafeteria staff will facilitate purchase and go right to their classrooms. Lunch will be in the classroom, supervised by staff, and it will be delivered. So the lunch options will be taken in the morning, or the lunch orders, and then they'll during your child's lunchtime will be delivered to the classroom. For anyone who's thinking, my child's brand new, they're young, how are they going to do this? We absolutely know that there's going to be some facilitation for some of our younger learners with some of these processes, and we can follow those through just like we do each and every year. So that will be okay. We have eyes on your kiddos from the moment they walk into the building, and this year is absolutely no different. As far as recess is concerned, that physical activity is so important. So in the past, we may have grade levels together out in common recess areas. What we've done is at each school, we've created defined recess spaces where the cohorts can utilize each space and then rotate through from one day to the next. So for example, you're not always on the ball field, you're not always on the playground, you're not always on the blacktop. You experience and rotate through those. Part of the guidance we received from the state and the expectations involve the creation of an isolation room with the health room. So students exhibiting potential COVID symptoms being able to be isolated for safety and health reasons, as well as protecting the safety and health of the other members of our school community. Each school has taken whatever steps necessary to create those isolation spaces and independent bathrooms should we need them. So that safety measure has been taken and put into place. Parent drop-off and pickup, similar to some of the core operations that guided by those pieces. Each school, based on their configuration, their layout, and their population, will be following social distancing guidelines, visitor expectations as far as dropping off and picking up without having parents entering the building, and trying to do so in a manner that is time efficient, because we know it has been recommended for people to consider the drop off and pickup. So that could cause increased numbers. We have contingencies in place for spacing students already should the numbers increase as far as our drop off and pickup areas. Signage and markings and student movement throughout buildings. Right now in all the buildings, there'll be two-way hallways. By that, I simply mean there isn't going to be any one-way defined travel patterns for teachers and students. What you'll probably see is once we get into school, teachers will have some common traveling patterns that they'll utilize. But there'll be markings on the floor guiding students to stay to the right. But there's also additional signage and markings on literally every wall, bathrooms, entrances, exits, and we've taken care to try to do that spanning the ages. So if an adult were to look, yep, it's there for them as well as for our students. And the final piece is virtual meetings. just because we can't be face-to-face doesn't mean that we're going to sacrifice the avenues for us to do the best work we can, whether it be planning around students or working as a staff collaboratively. So things like you may see PPTs, 504s, staff meetings, social committee meetings, parent meetings. Where possible, we are going to employ a virtual format, so there should be no drop-off in that area at all. So, Meg, we can go to the next piece. At this point in time, as Mr. Benigni indicated, we'll answer some of the questions. You notice his email right on the bottom. So if you have any questions, you can email him in real time right now, and we'll be able to respond, or certainly a central office can respond in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sousa. I'd like to respond to the real-time questions that you've sent in currently, and then I'll go back to ones that were sent in previously. The first question is, has any consideration been given to running a half-day schedule whereby students would have lunch at home? This would cut down on contact, provide a mask break, and remove access. Yes, we did. We also thought it would be difficult with transportation to run such a program because we would be doubling our transportation at that point, as well as limiting the instructional time. So it was definitely a thought and a consideration. Another thing is how teachers are even going to know what their children look like if the whole class has face covering every second. Again, I agree with it, but I'm worried about the damaging of my child, hurting her more than it helps her. Her mother and I need to know that, but it really comes down to a point. Sending your child to school is like sending them to boot camp or jail. We hope that's not the case. We know it's going to be different, but our message here is that it's better than having the distance learning and the point where students are isolated. Yes, they'll be wearing masks, but I can assure you, even at a smaller scale summer school, watching the students in the classroom, interacting with the teacher and interacting with their peers with masks on was special. And I think students, by their expressions, even though you couldn't see their mouths, they were happy to be back in school. And I could tell by the engagement that was going on. Is there mandatory reporting if a member of the student family tests positive? Is the family required to notify the school? First, if a member tests positive, yes, they are to notify the school, and we are to notify the health department, and there's a protocol that would be in place. We don't actually have the testing on site, but we do have a testing service that we use that turns around the test in 24 hours. Is the expectation that the students will be quarantined for 14 days? The expectation is we're going to follow whatever the Central Connecticut Health District tells us to do. If you look in the guidelines, it talks about 72 hours. But if the health center says it should be a quarantine of 14 days, if they say it should be a classroom that stays out for a given period of time, or it says the entire district or school, we're going to follow their guidelines. Will the rest of the class be notified of potential exposure? As far as notified of potential exposure, I don't know if we notify potential exposure, but if there was an actual exposure, we would notify. But we also have to keep in mind the confidentiality of the students that goes into it. So, but if there was a point where we needed to say, school will be out for X number of days, then you would know at that point that there was a potential exposure. How does the school district plan to enforce reporting? Well, I think that we're vigilant about attendance already, but I think there has to be more of a vigilance about attendance. If a student's not there, we want to ask the questions. They are to notify us. That's not just some rule that we're making. It's a rule at the state level that they are notified. The protocol of contacting the health district and a doctor. Will there be more care to the lives? Yes. It is important for everyone to be able to work.
Brian, you're cutting in and out a bit.
Okay. Great. Switch to I have is, any specifics on how remote learning will work? Would remote students be separate classes, or would they in the classroom, different teacher? How would it be assigned? Could it be a teacher, different elementary school? Will it assign rather than Hubbard school? Could grade levels be mixed? Would learning take place via Zoom or interactive most of the day? It's much, so as I'm cutting out, Aaron, if you understood that question and can answer it, that'd be great.
I'm going to do the best I can to answer what I think the question was, but I think that the question had to do with the remote hybrid and hybrid models. During the hybrid models, we will have been required by the governor and the commissioner of education to reduce the number of students that are present in school. I will be direct and say it's my least favorite option because I think that there are a lot of challenges of having kids in and out of school and having teachers trying to provide high quality instruction both to students in class and at home. That being said, we will be working with the teachers to make sure that they are supported in both in their daily instruction. So when the kids are in, they'll have smaller groups of kids that will allow them to give more individual attention and support. So even though it's a shorter amount of on-site time, they'll have many fewer students, and that will allow for higher level of attention. When the kids are out, they will have just had the kids in school, and they'll be able to plan appropriately for the 2 days that the students are in the out of school model. In the remote sessions, when families have signed up to have their student stay home and receive instruction with the support of the school district, we will do the best that we can to group students in grade appropriate groupings. But you can imagine that it's hard for us to make a firm plan for that until we know the numbers of students that are going to be participating under that model. In other districts, when they've surveyed parents, in the most typical number that we're hearing is about 80% of the families are choosing to send their kids back face-to-face. And so that leaves 20% that either are choosing another model of instruction or they're not sure at this time. The actual design of the remote instruction has to follow the choice by parents to have their students in that model. So for example, if we ended up with 5 kindergarten students and 5 first grade students out of the entire district, we might have one teacher who's assigned to teach kindergarten and first grade, where they could do some things all together in that group and some things that they're doing specifically with the kindergarten students and some things specifically with the first grade students. If the numbers are larger, so for example, if we had 20 second grade kids across the district, we would have all of those students assigned to a single teacher, and that might have some impact on the class assignments and class size of the kids that are in school instruction. The alternative is to hire many additional teachers, and to be frank, our budget doesn't support hiring many additional teachers when we're not sure how long this is going to last, and we're not yet sure what the demand is. So we will be doing the best that we can to make sure that teachers are assigned group sizes that are reasonable, and that the teachers that are providing providing instruction in any of those models are appropriately supported by the district.
Thank you, Aaron.
Brian, do you have additional questions to answer?
Sure do. With guidelines with travel restrictions are in place and the family members travels from work or vacation, will the student have to quarantine for 14 days as well? So the question is, if the parent has to travel, does the child have to quarantine because the parent traveled? The answer to that is no. That was a conversation with the Central Connecticut Health District that we would not require the student to quarantine because the parent traveled. Now, if the parent came back and was positive, that's a different protocol in place, and there may be a quarantine of up to 14 days if the parent was positive or someone in the household was positive. How will it be handled if someone contracts COVID or is suspected of coming in contact? Will the whole school close? Again, that's going to be a question with the CDC, whether it's a school, a class, or the district. Again, what if someone tests positive? And it's the same question here. It's going to be a conversation with the CDC.
I'm sorry, Brian, with the Connecticut Central Health District.
Yep. The Connecticut Central Health District, in particular, it's the director is Charles Brown. We are in conversations weekly with Charles and questions. A few questions here. How many mask breaks will these children have? Will they have mask breaks? Is not good enough. I need specifics since my child has asthma. So I think from a larger stance, the expectation is that there will be scheduled mask breaks throughout the day, but also students will have the opportunity to take a mask break when they need it, not just when it's scheduled. I don't know if any of the elementary principals, we've not talked specifics yet.
Yep.
But I don't know if anyone wants to share a little more on that.
Sure. And then certainly I'll ask Meg and Dave to jump in as well. That has been a very popular question around the use of masks, and Brian has been pretty clear about the expectation, the school district position around the mask for safety purposes. The clearest that I can be, as far as we're concerned, is we know that is the starting point and expectation, but our planning and our decision making around that has been centered around every safe and reasonable opportunity to provide kids breaks with masks. So we're not coming from a place of where can we find the opportunity to be more restrictive with what's expected. We're coming from a place of let's look across the day from K to 5 in all classrooms and learning environments where we could potentially get creative to provide students the opportunity to see faces, to not have those masks on without sacrificing health and safety. So that may look different in different places. How it looks at recess in a cohort may be different than how it looks in a classroom with beyond 6 feet social distancing with the shield, may look different between outside in an outside learning space. So it's really tailored, but the guiding principle is where can we find opportunities to be safe, but to allow students to have these breaks and be kids.
Yeah. And now the only thing I would add to that is something that I'm not sure if Mr. Bedingi said this in tonight's meeting or in a previous one we've hosted, but the mask breaks aren't necessarily determined by the teacher. You know, in the example that was read in the question, the student had asthma. If the student communicates that they need a mask break, they're going to get a mask break. These teachers are very in tune with what the students need, and we're going to meet their needs. It's not always going to be at 10:30. That's when you get your mask break. It's going to be when the children need those mask breaks as well. So that's all I wanted to add to your answer, Al.
Great point, Dave.
Thank you, Dave and Al. Next question: how will be handling social distance during months and days as it gets colder? Attempting to use outdoor space to keep the social distancing. Well, we intend to use outdoor space as much as possible. We recognize that as the months get colder, it may not be an option, and it may not be an option for a learning space. It may just be an option for going out for recess. What temperature thresholds will classes not be allowed out to go outside? I think we handle that as we've handled in the past. You know, on severely inclement weather, we don't allow recess or allow classes out. I think it will be given the same consideration. Last question, if you are recommending that teachers teach outside, and that is an option to address social distancing, why are we not starting in a hybrid model? And at this point, it's not our decision to start in a hybrid model. It's the decision at the state level. The state level has required live teaching. The hybrid model is an option. At some point, the state may turn it over to us to say that's our choice, but at this time choice of can parents come into the building prior to start of school to determine if the child is willing to attend? The answer is at this time we would not have parents in the school. If we were to have parents in the school, we'd have them in on an individual basis. It's to talk to an individual principal about. We wouldn't open up the school and have a mass of people. We wouldn't even meet the phase 2 guidelines to have a mass in the building. But we are talking about students, especially those starting at the K level, having an opportunity to go into the building with their parents to see the building. Remote learning, can decide to go home for remote learning outside of a medical condition? The answer is yes. That's an individual choice. Can a family elect to use the hybrid model if they are not comfortable sending their child to school? Well, the hybrid model is an in-school and out-of-school model, so I'm not so sure about that question. Who's responsible for wiping down the tables and desks at each meal? I don't know if that was discussed earlier, but at this point, the expectation is that they will get wiped down by the custodians twice a day. But we will have, after a meal, we will have spray and the ability for students to wipe down their own desks after a meal. If anyone wants to add anything further on that?
Yeah, actually, I just read an article suggesting that students who may have felt like they haven't had a lot of control over all of the situations that have happened in the last few months, that one of the strategies for helping them regain a sense of control is for them to have a sense of agency around what they can do, and that having jobs like wiping down their own desk and being responsible for helping to follow the health and safety guidelines can be a positive for our students to feel like they are having that sense of autonomy and control.
Those are the last of the questions that were currently sent in. I do have some questions that were sent in previously. I have a few other questions coming in. Hold on a second. For hybrid learning, is the classroom teacher responsible for teaching both groups in school and the group of distance learning at the same time? Yes. At this time, we're thinking the classroom teacher would be involved in that. We can't say definitively because we may have teachers that are also not in the building, so it may be a combination. Has there been any conversation? Go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead.
But in the hybrid model, they're not going to be teaching the students at home and the students in school simultaneously at the elementary level. So the classroom teacher would be responsible for hosting assignments and posting materials to support learning on the days that the students are not present in school. But their primary attention will be directed at the students who are in school on the days that those kids attend school.
And that's correct. I think Aaron is referring to grades 6 through 12. Teachers will be teaching, the teacher will be teaching remote students and current students in the class simultaneously. That would not be the case at the elementary. Is there a conversation about opening school in stages similar to how the state opened? At this time, that's not a discussion. I can't say that won't change with guidance from the state, the commissioner, and the governor. What about parents who voluntarily want to have children do remote learning? For parents, they're immune uncompromised. It's okay if you choose to do remote learning. That's a conscious choice that you as a parent have a right to do. We're going to do our best to educate those students to the same level we're educating the students that are coming to school. Pre-K iPads, 212 Chromebooks. Let's see there. Yep, we're still using and I guess I'll have a principal speak of it, for using Seesaw and then using Google Classroom, and the whole notion of iPads in the primary grades and Chromebooks in the upper grades.
Yes. So I'm going to address that first, and then we can let the principals jump in. I added some additional information to the next version of the draft plan to address this. But essentially, kindergarten students who do not yet have iPads will be assigned iPads, and first and second graders are expected to keep their kids that were in kindergarten last year and kids that were in first grade last year are expected to keep their iPads and move those forward to the next grade level. Students who just finished second grade and had an iPad assigned to them at home will be expected to bring that iPad back to school because the district needs to redeploy those iPads, and they will be issued a Chromebook. And the expectation is that we will have, as I think Mr. Kitzman indicated earlier, we'll have the classroom teachers and the instructional technology specialists work with the kids to make sure they're familiar with how to access information on those devices. Should we need to move from an in-school model of instruction to an out-of-school model? And we'll be prepared as a district to send the kids home with their device and a charger, possibly in those beautiful new duffel bags when if we have to shift models of instruction.
Next question. If you choose remote learning and a vaccine is later developed before the 2021 school year ends, yes. You have a right to return to school at any point. You have a right to choose remote learning at any point. It'll be difficult for consistency. Our expectation is that the students are at the same level. That is our goal. I can't say that it'll be perfect, but that is our goal. How will the district provide special education students that are unable to learn through distance learning if we end up with school closed again? I think there'll be paraprofessionals as well as special education teachers that will be giving distance learning, but live distance learning with those students at a much more frequent level than what we had in the past. We recognize that that's a difficulty of any distance model, and it's a shortcoming of it, but we'll do our best to meet the needs of the students.
And Brian, perhaps it would be appropriate for us to schedule a specific parent meeting for parents of students with IEPs who might have specific questions.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that Linda Holian or Michelle Zoisner at the elementary level, the special ed supervisor, if send her an email and you can ask that specific question, or I can push the question over there. So if a child's being given sanitizing items to wipe down the desk, isn't that a hazard to their own health? The thought there is that's being done in numerous districts. I've not had the direct conversation with the Central Connecticut Health District, but I know that many districts, students are being asked to wipe down the desk. If it's a sanitizing, it's anything that we're using to sanitize. As I said earlier, we'll have a sheet that will be sent out to all parents, which will specify the air, how we're handling the air in the building, such as, the amount of fresh air coming in, the window, at least one window being open, whether we're teaching with doors open. It'll specify all the criteria the state put forward. And then we also will have a document that specifies the cleaning routines as well as the cleaning materials that will be used.
And Brian, just to reinforce for the parents that are on the call, there are very specific guidelines about what kind of sanitizing materials we can use in schools. That's already regulated very carefully.
So that was the last question that I had sent in. I'm not sure if there's other questions. If you do have those questions, please feel free to send them to me or to send them to one of the administrators or Aaron, and we'll try to get you the answers. If you did send a question, as I said, you will get a follow-up email. We'll ask if your question was answered. And if not, you're welcome to schedule a time that you could obviously call in and we can have that conversation. Does it apply to at-home learning, hybrid, and distance, that it will be our own time for elementary kids for working parents? So the question is, will it be their own time to do the learning so that it's not during the day at a scheduled time? I can't guarantee that it's going to be at their own time if we do go to a distance model, because we recognize how important that live teaching is, that interaction with the other students, even though it's virtual, as well as interacting with the teacher. I'm not seeing any other questions. It's difficult when it's just an email, so I don't want to cut anyone short or feel that we didn't answer your questions. I hope this has been helpful. I don't think this will be the last meeting we have like this. I know that there'll be many more questions as we move forward. We will send out the finalized draft plan that goes to the state to you. And you will be receiving, emails from your building principals with more details about how things are handled at that specific building. And again, if you have, another question here. Okay, if children eat in their classroom, what will be done to keep those food allergies safe? So anyone who has a 504 with food allergies, we'll make direct contact with the parents. The first thought is that we'll allow them to eat in the classroom at their desk with their sneeze guard around them, their protective barrier. If that does not meet the safety requirements that the student needs, then we will find an alternative location and discuss that plan with the individualized parent. Yes, last year we did go to at the cafeteria that we allowed students to bring whatever items they wanted, and we had safety protocols in place, and we didn't allow that in the classroom. This year we will not be able to do that because all eating is taking place in the classroom. So we'll have individual discussions with any parents that have the students who have food allergies, and if the in-classroom model works because they're at their own desk and they're not at a surface where they're eating as all other students are eating, then we'll go with that model. If we need to do something special, we will. In the reopening plan, it said that children will have visual wellness checks upon entering the building. Who will be doing these checks and what are they looking for exactly? I think we're looking for students that, come in and maybe are sneezing and coughing and things that would be picked up by, the teacher, the school nurse, anyone who comes in contact with them. We're not having at this point, and the plan may change, we're not having specific checks where every person is checked by the nurse or an health aide. It was mentioned that other meetings that we'll be doing our best to maintain social distancing and not overcrowded classrooms. One of the easiest way to do this is reduce class size. Why is the district opting to school choice program, which is only bring more kids in the classroom? We've accepted the school choice program as 20 other districts in the state, and at this point, we're not able or willing to say to the students that you're not able to come to Berlin Public Schools. Those students are Berlin Public School students now, just residing in Hartford. So they'll have to abide by the same criteria that everyone else is abiding by as far as social distancing in the school, wearing of the safety mask. But as I said, we're not at a position to exclude them, nor a willingness to exclude them. We are taking a minimal number of students this year. Those students are at the primary grade levels, less their siblings. And to be very honest, at this point, the number of students that are opting to come to Berlin, we don't have a firm number on that yet, so it may be much less than we expected. But that's our position on choice. How many students in each classroom are foreseen right now? We really don't have numbers. We're going to send that survey out tomorrow to all of you. And what I can say is I've looked at four other districts, and the percentage ranges from 14% of the students not attending to 24% of the students not attending. So my guess is that we will end up somewhere in the middle there, and have to see where we end up as far as what students are not attending.
Brian, if I could just jump in for a second, because we do have existing families. In the past, class placement letters went out probably around the first week in August. That's going to be delayed a couple of weeks, and it's certainly not because we're late. That's by design. Due to the parent option and the circumstances, we do have existing class lists, but we know they may need to be adjusted based on those selecting remote learning and how that balances out. So we don't want to be sending out multiple lists and making multiple changes throughout August. So we're probably looking at around the third week in August where parents will get information regarding those placements. Thanks.
I have another question regarding not enough space in the classroom for lunch. So will there be alternative locations? No, what we're doing in there is we're providing a shield that is across the front and as well as on the sides for the students that will give them protection when they have to eat their lunch at their desk. Well, again, I want to thank you for your time. I hope it's been informative. I hope this type of format works. I know, again, as with will be in the classroom, it's much nicer to see people and to be face to face. But I think this will hopefully allow you to have some greater insight into our plan and how we hope to accomplish this. I just have one more question. Will there be a transcript of all the question and answers asked by parents? This will aid in question in the future. So on. Yes, we do want to do a Q&A type of chart that parents, we kind of group the questions by remote learning and so on. This will all be recorded and posted on the website on that channel. So if anyone that didn't get a chance or opportunity to view it, they can view it at a later date. So again, thank you very much for your time. I'll conclude the meeting at this point. Thank the administrators for your time. And we look forward to having your children back in the school. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions you may have. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
joining.
Take care.
Take care.